Do you like your bourbon with a little kick to it? Well, I've got you covered. Let's do this. Hi, welcome to Whisky Riffs. I'm Kevin, and today we're going to be tasting a Jim Beam whiskey, Booker's. They're Kentucky straight bourbon that's bottled in small batches. Now, I'm embarrassed to say that when I first got this bottle, it was actually a gift to my wife. It was a going away present for when we were moving to San Francisco. And I saw it in this wooden box, and it looked very country, very bourbony. You know, the big top had all this wax on it, and it had this panel in front of the wooden box. I don't know. For some reason, to me, it looked kind of hokey. It didn't look like it was anything worthwhile. And at the time, I had very little whiskey in my cabinet. I had a Woodford Reserve was my only bourbon, and I had three 18-year scotches, a Glenlivet, a Macallan, and a Highland Park. So I was a bit of a whiskey snob at the time. I was trying to elevate myself and say, well, I want the classy whiskeys. I want these high-end scotches, and I want, you know, the top, very pristine bourbons. And this just looked lame. I never heard of Booker's before. Well, it turns out that Jim Beam doesn't really advertise Booker's. This is one of those, if you know about it, you know about it, and it's not on social media or anything like that. And as it turns out, Booker's is a pretty impressive bourbon. It is one of those pick of the warehouse type bourbons. So when you look for the Pappy Van Winkle and the whiskeys that are more selected, this is one of those. The nephew of Jim Beam, Booker No, was the one that started this process of picking out Bookers, and it was for basically family members, and it was never cut or filtered. It was strictly what came out of the selected barrels and bottled. So when you look at Booker's, right away you see this label on them, and that's for each particular batch. This one says 2015-05, so May of 2015. Its alcohol percentage is 64%. It's 6 years, 7 months, and 3 days in age. So very specific and very, very much a small batch. Small batch is a term that is highly abused in the industry. They have some pretty big runs of whiskey and say they're small batch because it's I don't know, you know, fashionable to have a small batch bourbon. But this is a really small batch. I mean, it is, every selection that they have is even named. This one's Mama's batch. And I have an older bottle that's from, actually this is a newer, I have a newer bottle that's more empty that is from 2017-03, and this one is called Front Porch Batch. So, and this one, the percentage is different, 62.95%. A lot of these are between 125 proof and 130 proof. So they're pretty intense and quite the kick in them. Their selection process for which barrels to use is very precise. And if you go on their website, you'll see that each batch of Booker's has a listing of the specific rows and floors of the warehouse that they picked the barrels for these runs of whiskey. So it's not out of one cask, but it's not blended per se to get a certain minimum alcohol percentage. It is whatever comes out of those casks and put together to produce a certain flavor they say the casks are picked when they're ready. So the master distiller is going to go through, taste a series of casks, and say, these are the ones that we're going to select for Mama's patch, and put them into this bottling. The price of Booker's can go pretty high because of the various selections of batches. So I've seen it as low as $50. I've seen it as high as $100. Right now, I think the price that I can get a bottle of Booker's for, I believe it's a 2019 batch that I saw online, and it was around $80. So be careful. Don't overspend on a whiskey like this. It's certainly not something that's rare or unique. It is definitely aged pretty well. So when you're looking at a small batch bourbon that's at least 6 years old, that's a decent time, because a lot of bourbons will come out at 3 years or even 2 years, and they'll start to be bottled. So you are getting a little bit of age with this, and you're definitely getting some proof, which means you get to play around with it. You get to put it over ice maybe. You get to water it down to your taste. And that's something we're going to get into and try right now. So the pour I have here is actually out of the 2017 bottle. So this is going to be front porch batch. And they're both nearly the same alcohol by volume. This is almost 63%, and this one's 64%. So pretty close. But as with any of these small batch bourbons, similar to a cask strength whiskey where you have very little control over blending the flavors, each individual batch is going to be slightly different. So the tasting notes I'm going to give you, they're going to be even more off. So take these all with a grain of salt. As with any tasting, I'm sure you know by now, if you watch a few of these episodes, that taste is very personal. What I get out of a tasting and a nosing is just a general thing. And you need to try before you buy if you want to explore some of these whiskeys. So this one, because it's at such a high 128 proof, is pretty up there. You're going to have to be careful about nosing a whiskey with this much alcohol. The last time I tasted this and tried to nose it, I got a little too deep into it. There's caramel on this. There is honey and sweetness. If I can avoid the alcohol burn, I can also get a little bit of citrus on there, maybe some orange on the nose, and some of the wood notes in there too, some of the spice. You'll also see, look how dark that is. This is over 6 years in the center of a rick house, a warehouse, and in Kentucky. So you've got all that heat really working the whiskey in and out of the grain, and you get some nice color. Certainly nothing has been done to this. They're very specific. This is the whiskey that you get out of the casks. They take up to, I've seen some of their batches 8 or 10 casks. Other ones are just 2 or 3, but they're definitely going to be dark. All of them are going to be like this because they're all coming out of the same part of a huge warehouse, a Jim Beam warehouse. So very sweet on the nose, like I said, and a lot of nice bourbon notes in here. Now, that first taste is going to be really hot. It's very spicy. It's high alcohol level, so you get that kind of that instant heat in your mouth. And then I start to get some other flavors. The sweetness is there, but right away I'm still fighting off that alcohol burn. There's a thick oiliness to this. There's a little bit of vanilla and the sweetness is there, but that alcohol is really intense. and the oak spice is really intense, and that's what lingers. So on the finish, I feel that heat going all the way down. I feel the oakiness of this is giving it an intense dryness. So the back of my tongue is really dry, but it's also very oily. So if you've ever had like a liqueur that has that kind of syrupy taste to it, that is very rich and very thick, this is a little bit like that on the finish. Even though the whiskey is not anywhere near a liqueur, this is definitely a bourbon, but I get a lot of that similar result with the finish, with the aftertaste. Every taste gives me a little bit something different, which is what I like about Booker's. There's enough complexity in here. I think because they have picked the heart of the warehouse, a lot of the activity of the environment is working on these particular barrels, and I get even kind of a black licorice on the finish, as well as that oiliness and that caramel and a little bit of vanilla. You know, it's so hot. Let's go ahead and add some water to this and see what that does. Now, normally, you know, I did a huge pour. We're going to put a lot of water in here. I know, that's ridiculous. Normally, I would never do that to a glass of whiskey, but that eyedropper is not going to touch this. This is Booker's. This is nearly 130 proof. You can beat it up a lot. So let's see what that did to my glass here. Okay, it took the edge off the nose. I'm not getting the alcohol burn anymore. Getting a nice vanilla nose on it, a lot of sweetness. More fragrant, not floral, but maybe maybe like a hay smell to it. Yeah, that took the edge off. That initial burn is nowhere near as intense, and there's a lot of flavor still. I dumped quite a bit of water in this glass, and you still taste Booker's. It didn't go away. It's one of those whiskeys where it's a hot summer day. You want something refreshing. Maybe you want a whiskey, but it's damn hot out. So how about some ice in my whiskey? This is one of those bourbons that can withstand ice. It's going to allow you to still enjoy the flavors of Booker's without getting lost in the constant water dissipation from the ice into the whiskey. If you're not looking for an intense bourbon, if you're not looking for a little bit of fight and a little bit of bite in your whiskey, then certainly stay away from Booker's. But if you like something that's a little more challenging, a little more interesting, has a lot of right from the cask flavors and personality, then check out Booker's. See if you can try it maybe at a bar or at a friend's house and get a taste first before you invest in a bottle, because you may have trouble getting them for a good price. Like I said, $80 is the cheapest I can get around here. I used to be able to buy it for about 45 or $50. So I don't know what you're going to get it at. If you can get it for 40 or $50, very good. Lovely price. It's been a bit of a crazy week for me around here. I hope yours has been a little more calm. I know the pandemic is still forcing most of us to isolate and stay away from friends. If you need to chill because the summer heat is starting to hit your area of the world, then go ahead, drop some ice in a glass, pour some Booker's over the top of it, and just relax. Until next episode, cheers.